insulated cooler bags. So we invested in a whole bunch of these at the start, or well, a little bit into the start of our thing. And essentially, when you come to pick up, you bring me your empty bag from last week and we'll hand you your full bag for this week.
So first off, I want to welcome everyone who is here today. Thank you for joining us. I'm Stephanie Gordon. I'm part of the marketing team here at Growcer, and I'll be the moderator for today's discussion. I'm excited to welcome back Carley Basler for her second webinar with Growcer. Carley is the sustainability coordinator for the Churchill Northern Studies Centre, and she runs their weekly subscription box. So the subscription box, branded under Rocket Greens, as you can see on the logo on the screen, includes fresh produce that they grow with their Growcer farm, and they're based out of Churchill, Manitoba. So yes, they grow in some pretty cold conditions. So Carley and her team recently celebrated 4 years of Rocket Greens, and we are very lucky to have her here to share her journey and what she's learned along the way. And before we continue, if you have a question throughout the webinar, feel free to type your question into the questions tab. It's on the side of your screen. For the first half of the webinar, I have some questions prepared. And for the second half of the webinar, last 15 minutes, we'll open it up to audience questions. But if I see a good audience question come through while we're talking to Carley, I will throw it in there. So you can also upvote other people's questions, bringing it up to the top. So I know that many of you have that question and we'll get it answered sooner rather than later. So don't forget to find that questions tab. And if you take a look at the chat, I did ask everyone who was here early to post where they're joining in from, just so we can see where across the country people are coming from. Today's webinar will be recorded and sent out to everyone who is registered, so have no fear. You will get a copy of the recording later this week. So without further delay, let's get started. So before we get into the Q&A, I just want to make sure everyone is on the same page here with a little CSA 101. So when we think about our food system today, the majority of us, shop in a grocery store. In fact, Canadians spend about 100 billion annually at over 3,000 grocery stores. And with this kind of change in how our food system used to be, a movement came about that saw people really wanting to get back in touch with the way their food is grown. And in addition, the shift was also motivated by concerns about the industrialization of the food system, our reliance on imported foods, the loss of local farmers from the community, and the use of pesticides. And so all these concerns prompted the start of community-supported agriculture. So it was quite a grassroots movement. And to describe it, as you can see here on the screen, it is just an alternative food movement involving a direct farmer to consumer partnership. So if we see here on the visual, what a small farm could have operated like, or some still do, is at the beginning of the season, they have to invest, to buy the seeds, the fertilizer, the machinery, and then throughout the growing season, as you see in that big field, they're growing their crops, they're planting their crops, they're growing their food, and then they take that harvest and they bring it to a farmer's market or a store or a farm gate stand, and then they sell it for money. And so they recoup their investment at the end of the season. And in this model, it's quite risky for the farmer. If you see in the beginning, they're investing all their time and their money into seeds, fertilizer, growing food in the field. And what happens if you have, a bad weather event or a bad harvest and you have nothing to bring to that market at the end of the week? How do you recoup the costs? So for community supported agriculture, because you have a direct relationship with your consumer, the model operates kind of in a different order, where consumers are able to kind of give you money up front for you to buy your seeds, your fertilizer, your machinery. You grow throughout the season. And then because you already have that built-in customer, you kind of know where everything you're planting is going. So typically, how to become a CSA member, some of you probably are, some of you probably have a local CSA. You agree to pay an amount at the beginning of the season, either in one lump sum or, kind of in installments. And return for your, membership fee, you receive a variety of fresh vegetables weekly, biweekly, monthly, whatever kind of the farm is like. And there are many different ways to kind of structure community supported agriculture. And I think for today, we're going to talk about what it's going to look like with a container farm. So I've just used photos from Carley's Growcer farm at the Churchill Northern Studies Centre. And so with container farming on a whole, it really just refers to vertically stacked hydroponic farming systems inside a container. So an example would be a Growcer farm. And farmers who use container farming have the notable benefit of growing year round. So with a farm, sometimes you can only grow in the summer or the spring, depending on what your location is. With a container farm, because everything is kind of indoor and with controlled environment agriculture, you're no longer constrained to just that season. You can grow year round. So what that means is the CSA subscription looks a little bit different because it's not, for a couple of months and you're doing a whole lump sum at the beginning of the spring. So what it does look like and could look like, and what it does look like for Rocket Greens is like a weekly or a bi-weekly subscription. And it's different from the typical, community supported agriculture because, the consumer doesn't have to commit for the season. They can commit for however many weeks or months that they want because it is happening year round. So there's some flexibility for consumers. And before we move on to, the questions with Carley more about her project here, I do want to share, and you probably kind of can tell, what are some of the advantages of doing a community supported agriculture model? Well, the first is, because of the investment upfront by customers, farmers are better able to plan their production for the season with a guaranteed market at the end. And they're no longer worrying about, where their next customer might come from. There's a lot less stress, a lot less risk with the model. And then the farmer or the grower can spend more time focusing on what they're growing and making sure they're growing a healthy crop. And consumers benefit because they get a local, fresh produce on a regular basis. There are other CSA farms that do meat or eggs, other kind of different things. So the consumer benefits because they kind of get their weekly supply of something that's fresh, that's locally grown. And the CSA model is really for people who want to invest back into the local community. So it's really not just another way to get produce, but it really is a way to put your support back into the community, back into the local growers. And if we think about the origins of the CSA model, like I said before, it really came from people seeing, local growers struggle and their community struggle. And so community supported agriculture is very, very based historically in that community element. So even though a customer does get, fresher produce, longer shelf life, things like that, it really is, how can I support the people around me and their businesses? So that wraps up our CSA 101. Let's move on some questions for Carley, which I will invite her onto the screen here. So I just want to say, welcome, Carley. It is so great to have you here. And so I guess the first question is, what is your food box model?
So currently our CSA is called the Launch Box, and we are offering it in 2 sizes. So we have a size called Standard, which is roughly 6 pieces of produce a week. It kind of follows a standardized format of 5 or so pieces of produce, like lettuces and bok choys and larger pieces of produce, and then a herb. And then we have a mini size, which is 3 types of things, kind of a mixture of a lettuce, spinach or kale, or something else, and then a herb. So yeah, we try to keep a lot of variety because we have a lot of subscribers that are continuing subscribers that get each week and have been for a number of years. So we like to do lots of variety to keep it fresh.
Mm-hmm. And I did talk about how community supported agriculture is very rooted in community. So when you first started out, how did you gauge that interest from your community? How did you know they were going to be down to support you?
That's a really great question. So when we first got our grocer in late 2017, we realized right away, the training team came to Churchill. We filled up our grocer with water, turned the lights on, and planted our very first seeds. And then it was like, oh my goodness, in 6 weeks, we're gonna have so much stuff. So really, I think my CSA model was born out of panic because our town is so small. And especially in December, which was when our very first crop is due, like our population is generally at an all-time low. Even people who live here are often not here in December. So yeah, we quickly decided that the only way to make sure that like our produce had a home or like a place to go to right away would be to figure out who in town is like really, really into leafy greens and who would want to have it all the time. And the way that we did that was we actually hosted a market right after Christmas. Like we just called it a New Year's market. We basically unloaded a whole harvest out of the grocer. We toted it all to town and set it all up on a table, like in an open community space. Remember way back when we could all hang out together? Anyway, so it was an opportunity for people to wander through, smell, touch, see. And at that time we just had bags and we were like, 6 pieces is this much, 3 pieces is this much. And people were just shoving it in bags. And at the same time, we were talking to everyone that came to the table and just saying like, would you want to have this every week? And collecting email addresses. And right after that market, we emailed everybody. And by the next week we had 10 subscribers. And then the week after that, we had 20. And we've grown up to as many as around 50. But usually we hover around 35 to 40 households subscribe.
Yeah, that's great. And then that community element comes from when you're actually talking with potential customers, being like, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what you can get. And I really liked what you mentioned about how giving people the opportunity to taste, see, touch what you're growing. Because a huge part of that is, especially as someone who's like new to this and probably like container farming is probably new in Churchill, it was so good to demystify probably like what exactly you're offering. So you talked about how everyone kind of came to visit you at the market. What is the model now? Is it a pickup model or a door-to-door delivery model?
Yeah, so we do a weekly harvest. It's every Wednesday. And we do come into town and do deliveries at the same time to the 2 local grocery stores. So they get their standing order and also the local hospital cafeteria. And then we've offered free delivery for seniors and people with mobility issues. They just basically need to reach out to me and say like, I'm not able to pick up my veggies. Like, again, we're a very, very small community. So this might not be something that works everywhere, but it works really well for us. Churchill's very small. But then we have a centralized location where the subscribers who don't pay for delivery or get their free delivery can come and pick up. And it actually, again, COVID has complicated everything, but in the beginning, it was a very social thing. People were hanging around and chatting. You know, I was hearing people talk about different ways that they cook it. Oh, what do you do with your bok choy? Like, you know, it was like a little bit of a social event. But now it's kind of just a quick in and out. Everyone's masked and stuff, but that's fine. But it is nice for me to touch base with customers once every couple of weeks or once a week. Fiona and I are currently alternating handout weeks. So, but it's a way for us to engage with the community. Most people don't know, probably who are on this webinar, but the Churchill Northern Studies Centre is actually 30 kilometers outside of the town of Churchill. So we've been a community organization for 40 years, but we are just slightly geographically removed from the day-to-day of Churchill. So to come in and set up one night a week and just be there has been really nice, just to like immerse ourselves in the community a little bit more. And the other thing that we do with our subscription service is that we ask that everyone become a member of the Churchill Northern Studies Centre. So I would say that that's just been really nice for our organization as a whole, because we have a lot of community members now who are members of our organization that might not have been otherwise. So it's a nice tie-in for the availability of fresh produce, of course, but like also for the Northern Studies Centre to engage with the community in a different way than they have in the last like several decades. So
yeah, and that's a really good point, especially for everyone in our audience who is part of an organization. How can you have a project that kind of operates, you know, like a little bit independently from the organization, help the organization back, especially if you think about organizations that have food mandates, sustainability mandates, or you talked about how you offer free delivery to those with mobility issues. There's so much opportunity for collaboration. If there is an organization in your community who wants to support a business like yours, where you're like, hey, like, how can we collaborate? And then you work off of each other's audience. So I think it's great that the Churchill Northern Studies Centre is able to kind of give you guys a platform to work out of, and it also benefits their mission as well for sustaining the North and all the research you do. One question I do have is, you talked about, people coming to pick up. What exactly is the packaging situation like? Are people coming with their own bags? Do you give it to them in a bag? What is the packaging situation like?
Yeah, that's a really good question because we tried a lot of things early on. But what seems to work for us and what we have settled on is I brought one, insulated cooler bags. So we invested in a whole bunch of these at the start, or well, a little bit into the start of our thing. And essentially, when you come to pick up, you bring me your empty bag from last week and we'll hand you your full bag for this week. We don't have a pack unit attached to our grocer unit. So we actually bring all of these blue bags in to the grocer and we line them up. So we're picking and packing our lunch boxes directly in the unit, right in the midst of harvest. And then we leave this, like within a couple of hours of them being packed, we leave to town and take them to the distribution point. So yeah, they stay, they keep really well in here. They're somewhat protected from the elements. We've had a couple of instances of lettuce getting a little bit cold on the bottom, but for the most part, this works really good. And I think most of our subscribers now probably have a special little place set aside in their fridge to nestle this in there, and the stuff keeps for a really long time in the bags. When we very first started, we were putting the name tags on the bags individually for customers, but that just got really confusing. And if someone forgot their bag, we also found that customers respect their bag a little bit more if their name's not on it. So yeah, things that you learn along the way that you wouldn't expect. But yeah, we're using insulated bag alternating system. And with COVID, it's added maybe like an hour or two of work a week to our overall flow, just for sanitizing the bags when we get them back from the customers. So
yeah, and it's great to see that the bags are a sustainable option and that people can recycle them. Someone actually did ask a question: if you have a barcode system to confirm an order or to confirm a pickup, how do you know that a customer is actually coming in and picking up a piece of their subscription?
We're pretty, I jokingly call myself kind of an analog person. I'm a little bit old school. I love pen and paper. So right now with our current subscription list, we just keep a list of how many standards and how many minis we have each week. And people will reach out to me and put their things on hold, and we just maintain a list. So if so-and-so is going out of town this week and doesn't need their mini, I just take it off the one week and put it on to the next week. And then when people come and pick up, we kind of keep track of who's coming, because a lot of times we have to do reminders for people. So I have a 6 p.m. reminder that kind of goes out on Wednesday evenings, like, hey, friendly veggie reminder. There's always a few stragglers. So it's very, very low tech, our organizational strategy for the subscriptions. But it is manageable with the amount that we have. Right now we have about 35 households. So it's not too hard, and people tend to travel in chunks from here. It's not one and then none, because of the investment it takes to get out of Churchill. So I find it not too bad. It's mostly confusing around Christmas holidays and stuff, but and then we don't really do orders specifically for different products. Like if you get a standard, what's in your standard is what you get, and that's predetermined by me 6 weeks ago, and basically follows a format. So yeah, I'm not taking orders specifically. You get a standard or you get a mini, and you're here or you're not here, kind of thing. So
speaking of that kind of process, what's some of the feedback you've received from customers, and do you actually have like a channel where people can give you feedback throughout the process? Like, hey Carley, I really liked X vegetable in last week's subscription, really want to see more of that. Or hey, you're putting too much in the bag, I'm not using all of it. What is some of the feedback so far, and do you have like a channel to gather feedback throughout the process?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're out there on social media, so people can always chime in whenever they want. And I do take emails and personal messages all the time from subscribers. We did do a survey in 2018, and it was like exactly what you would think. I love kale. I don't really like kale. It was like, it came back kind of ambiguous, how do you please everybody? But I think that really what's sort of happened here in Churchill with the Rocket Greens and launch boxes like really come about organically. Like if you're really into it, you're still subscribed. If it was too much for you to handle, I've had people take a couple months break, or people who do garden take the summer off and then return in the winter. We know everybody. So a lot of that I can even anticipate now, like, you know what I mean? It's for a while, I thought maybe people were just being really nice and not saying anything, like not wanting to tell me something negative about it just because it, like, we are so small. But I think people are been fairly honest. And at the handout night, like I have heard other people ask other people, like, how do you use this? How do you do that? And we've been trying to, we post a lot of pictures of food on our Facebook through 2018, 2019, and we got people to share back that way. I'm interested in doing survey again or something along those lines, especially now that I have Fiona on my team and she's so good at these kind of things. But yeah, I think that just because it's informal, that we mostly just do this by word of mouth, or like Churchill's local social media scene. Like we have an online bulletin board that's very heavily used in our community. So yeah, a lot of stuff happening on there.
Yeah. And I would like to remind everyone, if you are submitting a question, submit it in the Q&A tab instead of the chat, just because it's easier for me to see it if it's in the Q&A tab. So I liked what you said about how customer feedback is quite easy for you because you do have a small community. So I'm also interested to know what you yourself have learned. So I know people say, you know, the best teacher is experience. Was there anything that you learned starting Rocket Greens, one major lesson that you look back on and being like, okay, yeah, I learned that one the hard way?
I think that like one of the harder lessons was just about that you can't really do it all. In 2018, I had a helper on harvest days, but for the rest of the time I was kind of by myself. And then of course, you have a lot of big dreams. Like I know this webinar is about Launchbox, and Launchbox is great. It's like the backbone of my project and it's my number one priority always with the harvest. But I think as being part of a research and education organization, we really want to do, we want to partner with a dietitian and do all this food education and, you know, partner with some local Indigenous groups and get, general acceptance or cultural acceptance of these foods, like things like that. Like there were so many things I wanted to do. And then really I just realized that there's so much happening that the thing I need to concentrate on is the thing that I'm doing, which is like my goal. And I always talk about it now, is to provide fresh, locally grown greens year round to Churchill in an affordable way. And that is what I do. Like that is the main thing that I do. And everything else, I'm open to partnerships, but I'm not going to be in charge of any of those other things. If people want to partner with me, like I can provide Rocket Greens or provide, you know, something like this, like we can talk about my experiences and stuff, but my job is to continue to provide Rocket Greens for Churchill.
Yeah, so actually you mentioned it before where when you're on your way back into Churchill, you stop by the grocery store and you have other kind of customers for your produce that are not just from your launch box. And actually you had Dan's Diner, which I guess is a local restaurant, put Rocket Greens in every course of their 2019 menu. And that's great to see that you have that local support. What was the difference for you working with a restaurant and, you know, doing the subscription box, just so people can get a sense of what distribution model might be a fit for their skill set and their personalities?
So a lot of like how we've done it is like come down to like the thing that I call plant math. Like, okay, we have this many plants that are due for harvesting this week, and how are we able to move that around effectively? We don't have great like storage capabilities. So kind of like, yeah, first dealing with the grocery store, how much are you going to want? I really wanted it in the grocery store. That was important to me because I know that a subscription is not like the way a lot of people, you know, organize their lives. So having it in the grocery store and out there and visible was really important. So getting a standing order dialed in with the people that you are definitely going to take every week. So then that is like a concrete need that you need to fulfill. And then same with the hospital cafeteria, we kind of did the same thing. Like, can you be like an overflow spot for me, or is there something specific that you want? And we kind of, it took us like about a year to get that all sorted out about what exactly they would use effectively and would be a welcome addition to what they offer. Launchbox, how many people we have, mathing that out and making sure that those bags are filled consistently and kind of making sure that it's the same thing. If you're a mini, you're getting the same thing as all the other minis. And if you're a standard, same thing as all the other standards, and getting that sorted. And always that's the number one priority. Everybody else comes second, because they're paying in advance, of course, like as per the model. And then with whatever is left, if there is even anything left, trying to make sure that our guests in our cafeteria at the Churchill Northern Studies Centre get some special pop-up diners like Dan's Diner, making sure that we can share the message with them. Like they are part of a larger tour company. They got a great big advertising budget. We knew that other people were going to find out about the project that way. So a little bit for exposure reasons. And then also, like you mentioned, it is different to work with chefs than it is to work with the manager of the produce section of the grocery store, than it is to work with just people that you know that want to eat spinach every week. What I found feedback from chefs was like they're very into the flavor. But the one thing that like high-end chefs understand the produce, short order cooks and things find the lettuce to be a little delicate. And I've had that feedback that it's because it's softer than romaine that you buy in a store, which is kind of like cardboard first. So it doesn't, if they plate it early and it sits there for a bit before it gets to the table, it might not come across as nice looking, even though it probably tastes a lot better and is a lot healthier. So yeah, it's been interesting. But right away I noticed with the like more higher end chefs that cater to like the more the tour groups and things, they're very much into the flavor. They recognize the quality. They're super into the herbs that come out of the grocer. Like they're quite potent, and a little bit goes a long way. So what was really neat about the Dan's Diner event was that's like a small plate dining experience. So a bunch of tiny things. So we didn't even really have to give them that much produce, and to have 20 people dine like a 9-course meal over however many nights. Like it's like a leaf or two of all of these different things, but it was like such a great way to like showcase the produce to an audience that would never normally probably have that. So yeah.
Yeah, and I actually just want to take some audience questions because just we have a lot coming in. So someone asked, how do your prices, and I know you mentioned you're in the grocery store, how do your prices compare to those from other competitors? Who are your competitors, and how does what you're offering stack up in terms of price for people in Churchill?
Sure. So pricing was tricky, and that was something that I didn't have a lot of experience with. Like I'm not a vegetable seller. I don't have a background in that. That was the most new thing about starting Rocket Greens. So essentially, the price it costs for you to grow something in a grocer depends on where you live, how much you pay for electricity, how much you pay for water. So we had a starting point that we worked with. Then we had our conversations with the grocery store. This was very early on, before we'd even planted a seed. Corey, the co-founder of the grocer, made some connections for us with the Northwest Company, which is one of the 2 grocery stores here, for me to talk to someone that, you know, sells produce for a national chain. And they explained to me what their markup was going to be. So then I knew if I set the price at this amount, they're going to add this much to it. And I wanted my produce to sit on the shelf next to things that were imported from the South and still be less expensive, because that seemed wrong to me, that people would be charged more, even though I don't have control over what the grocery store does. And then when we priced the launch box, we wanted to price the launch box so that if you were someone who was going to buy 6 pieces of produce from them or 6 pieces of produce from me, that you would get savings from me, but I would get to keep a little bit more. So I make more off of the launch box people than I do off of the grocery store, but they're paying less, if that makes sense. It's kind of confusing, but yeah, because of the grocery store markup, I took that into consideration. And then where we live in a remote community, there's also the consideration of how the government applies subsidy to fresh food in the grocery stores. So I'm also competing against food from down south that they can buy at a crazy price and then decide what the price is. I'm competing with the government subsidy that the grocery stores can qualify for, but I don't get to qualify for because I don't transport my food from a long distance away. And then just a little bit of that perception. I just didn't want our stuff to seem more expensive, or to people to somehow perceive that we were trying to make money because we're operating as a nonprofit. So yeah, tricky, but was doable for us. So we've found a sweet spot. It's nice, easy math, $20, $10. And we haven't changed our pricing at all because we're not really operating it for profit, so to speak. We're just trying to, maintain our project.
Yeah. And I think you talked about your thinking behind the pricing. So, you went into the grocery store, they told you what the margin is, you're working backwards from your cost of production. I think this kind of method is something that anyone can apply to their own situation. So, like, what is your market? Maybe in a remote community, the price for produce is higher because of all the transporting it from the south and stuff. But also you talked about electricity, water, the cost of production, and then how many customers are available in your community. That's also something people should consider in their kind of how they determine price. It's like, are there enough people paying X amount of dollars to, keep the subscription working? We also have another question. You talked about people sharing recipes when they're picking up the launch box. Do you have, or do you suggest recipes? Do you invite your subscribers to share their favorite recipes on their site? How does that kind of engagement work?
We sort of did that informally, like through most of 2019 and into 2020. I had a different intern at the time who was managing our Facebook page, and she was doing featuring people's subscribers' photos of what they were making with their rocket greens, and if people were providing recipes, she was attaching those. We haven't really vigorously done that. A lot of people have suggested a cookbook, and I file that under the same kind of categories I did before. I'd love to do a cookbook, but I'm quite busy. So right now my job is to just make sure that I'm putting out the best vegetables consistently week after week, despite a lot of challenges that have been happening over the last little bit, not even to mention the weather and the distance and everything. But so, maybe down the road we'll do some kind of rocket greens cookbook, but for now, a lot of people are just sharing photos. I think Fiona just shared a photo last week of something that her and her partner made at home, which was super yummy, and I think it's something that people don't always think about. I wouldn't make a great cookbook. I do mostly the same things with mine over and over again. I'm kind of a robot when it comes to eating, but
So you mentioned Fiona, who is part of your team. Someone is asking, what is the size of your team that you have, required, including yourself, to kind of manage the subscribers that you have? So I know you probably started on a small team. Where is the team now? How many people do you feel like you need to keep, subscriptions going out the door and stuff?
So for the day-to-day of the grocer, operations, maintenance, and harvest and all that stuff, it's mostly Fiona and myself, although we do have other interns that work at the Churchill Northern Studies Centre that get trained, because we find that a 2-person minimum on harvest day makes it manageable, because we'll do all of the picking, packing, cleaning, transplanting, and delivery and handout all on the same day. So it's a lot of work, very labor intensive on the one day. So a minimum of 2. So if either Fiona or I need to be off, we like to have at least a couple of other people on our staff trained. But for a long time, we did it with just me and a person who I borrowed from the other department for a day and a half a week, or a day a week even. And then I'm fortunate enough that I do, the Churchill Northern Studies Centre has a financial assistant. So she processes all the payments and kind of tracks keeps track of the invoicing and stuff for me, including for the grocery stores and restaurants and stuff. So that's nice. Although if I didn't have another job that I was doing on top of rocket greens, that part could also probably be doable by me. So, I mean, your minimum team would probably be 2. If you're operating 1 unit, but keeping in mind that it would be nice to have someone else trained so that one of the 2 of you could disappear every once in a while. Because it does get a little exhausting. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean it's relentless. It doesn't matter. There's a harvest happening on Wednesday. It doesn't really matter how you feel or, what's going on that day, or even if there's not even as many people in your town during that time, you still got to go and do all that cleaning and all that transplanting and all that picking and all that packing. And it's a lot of work. So if you like vacations, I would recommend training somebody else.
And it's also harvest days are usually your biggest work days. You mentioned how you had someone helping out with the finances because you are part of that larger structure of the Churchill Northern Studies Centre. Someone has a question about, is there like a link you send out to everyone? How do people subscribe? How do you keep track of who is subscribing? What's the logistics?
It basically happens by word of mouth. People reach out to the center, or they'll reach out on social media, or they'll reach out through a friend. And right now I mostly just communicate with people through email. I email back and say, we got standards, we got minis, it's this much, we pickups on Wednesday at this time. What do you want? Do you want, and they reply back and they go on the list. So like, it's very, very simple and straightforward. And we were doing a weekly email, but we are just finding most people in our town aren't really reading their emails. They're looking at that bulletin board. So we use the local community bulletin board to remind people that it's Wednesday again, and these things are going to the grocery store, and these things are going to be in your launch box of your subscriber. So I feel pretty confident that if there's anyone in my town that wants to know about Rocket Greens or wants to sign up, that they know how to do that. Yeah. We talked about would it be manageable to take custom orders, and I just don't feel like that's right for me at this time. So you get what you get, and if you don't like it, you can buy it in the grocery store. It was kind of like our attitude. I know that sounds like rude, but I mean that in like a less blunt way of just basically like, we're making it available both ways. There's a little bit of a price difference, but it's not enormous. So if you really don't want kale, then you can just buy spinach and lettuce from the grocery store kind of thing. But if you don't mind to have a variety coming at you every week, you'll save a little bit, and you can support us directly if you'd like to do that. But we're just as grateful for the support that we get in the launch box as the people who are buying it in the grocery store. When we walk into the grocery stores on Wednesdays and the things that we took there last week are sold and gone, like that makes me happy too. It makes me happy to know that there are people who are still willing to support the project in a different way, and a way that works for them as well. So
yeah, in the third session coming up in this workshop series, we're going to be talking with Darren, who is a business consultant, and that's something that we're going to hear him say as well, where as a local grower doing any type of community supported agriculture, it's not just a produce subscription. People want to support you in what you're doing. So if you say, hey, this is the 6 types you get this week, and that's all there is, there's still that added element of like, oh, I like what, Rocket Green stands for, and I like what they do. So there's another element beyond just like, oh, I'm not a fan of kale. But you also talked about how
we have a subscriber who told me for a while that they were having trouble keeping up, but he stayed subscribing because he liked me. And I was like, oh, that's so nice. They're on a little bit of a break now, but he's our secret shoveler. He actually goes, even though he's not subscribed, he goes and shovels the steps each week of the handout location. So it's pretty sweet. Yeah.
He found his way to support the subscription.
That's right.
Having costs. But you did talk about how the bulletin board has, more eyes on it versus like people's inboxes. So how do you actually market Rocket Greens? Is there a particular channel, especially when your project was just starting, was there a particular channel you found the most useful, or was it just about going to where your community already is and inserting yourself in that conversation?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I said, we handed out our first harvest at a community feast. We got a little bit lost in the shuffle there because that was the year that Churchill lost the rail line, and there was a lot of food being handed out at that community feast. So that's why we planned the market for the following week. So most people got like a head of lettuce at the community feast, or at least someone from their table did. And then the following week we did the market. And then, yeah, I think word just sort of spread the way it does in Churchill. Oh, you get that Rocket Greens? Oh, how much does it cost? I'm sure these conversations are happening, where I don't know where they're happening. And then, the sort of like transient community of Churchill, like nurses shuffle through, school teachers and things shuffle through our CMP officers. So they're just passing the word amongst themselves. So a new teacher comes to town. Oh, you must be the new teacher, because I'll get an email, and it's kind of easy to figure out who these people are. And then we have like a really large group of our like local people who don't move, and they've been subscribed from the start. Like I have a good handful of subscribers that have been there since the very first week. So kind of cool.
So speaking of the first week, how would you say the first year compares to the fourth year?
So I would say we learned a lot along the way. It's almost, when really want to nail down what those things are. It's hard to say, but I would say that we were putting out higher quality launch boxes now than we were in the start, just between the packaging, figuring out how to cycle through the varieties, keeping track of our herb area. We didn't really have a herb area at the start. The herbs were kind of like mixed in all amongst all the produce everywhere in the grocery unit. Now we have a zone, and we're sort of getting a good handle on that. Fiona's a strong tracker, and she's dialing in on the amounts of time and amounts of harvest that we get out of the herb area. So we're learning. Some of it we're doing a little bit like by intuition, and then some of it, we're trying to really like quantify. But I would say that in general, like we're doing a better job now than we were, which is, I guess, your ultimate goal. Are we going to sell as many launch boxes, or did we sell as many launch boxes in 2021 as we did in 2020? Not quite, but I think that they were all better. So, little successes along the way.
Yeah, and I just want to shout out Fiona, who is actually in the Q&A, I guess, channel answering people's questions. Someone asked, what veggies do you fill your boxes with? And she answered that question. So if you want to go into the Q&A tab, you have a whole list of, what subscribers can get. And there also is another question about, okay, how do you use your overflow if you're growing more than subscribers you have?
That's a good question. And it does happen in Churchill all the time. So if I'm lucky, our cafeteria would be in operation, and a lot of times I just have a good relationship with the cooks, where I'm just like, here's another 7 kale. It's random number, and I don't know what you're going to do with it, but like we can keep it here. I did order a nice cooler for myself that's tucked away in the back of the building, closer to the grocer, that we purchased with some grant money from the Churchill Regional Economic Development Fund. So now I can sort of sit on things for a week, because it does keep very well. It's so fresh, like it keeps so well. So we can use it in a different way if we want to. And then sometimes if there's just really no other way, we've done donations to food banks. We've donated to cooking classes. We've donated to the home ec class in the school. And sometimes we just make it disappear into the launch boxes. Here you go. Here's some bonus items for you this week, because we had a dozen leftovers of whatever. So it kind of varies, but that can be a problem. The math doesn't always work out right, but there's plenty of ways to get rid of fresh food. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it's really good that you have those relationships with your community, so you can, call up the food bank or the local school being like, hey, we have some extra, would you be interested? So you talked about how, customers get what they get, but also some customers are supporting you just because they like you. What would you say is your average customer retention rate? Has it changed throughout the years? And do you do anything specifically to help retain customers?
Yeah, I think that like living where we are and what is available to us as food in general, like we don't have a lot of choice. We have 2 little grocery stores. Our freight comes in once a week. So if you don't shop the day or the day after the produce goes out on the shelves, so you're down to like slim pickings. So I think that our customer retention is just based around the fact that there's a group of people in this town that wanted to be guaranteed like this much fresh produce each week, and that they're the type of people that use it. I think if you were a customer in my town and you were throwing away stuff every week, that you would eventually come to me and say, I think I'll take a break, I'll just buy from the grocery store. And we have had people say that. So I think a lot of it is just based on the fact that we're not, fresh food is just not available to us here. And we're offering that, like that's our whole offering. So that's how, those are the people that we tend to gravitate toward the launch box itself.
Mm-hmm. And I know we talked about—
We haven't done anything specific. We do give away like some jams. This past year, we gave away some potatoes and carrots, or potatoes that we grew in like a little outdoor plot. And we like the part of the Rocket Greens project, is a little bit of local gardening support. So we did a seedling giveaway like at the same time as our launch box handout. So that wasn't just for subscribers, but we were trying to do other things in the community in general that isn't just selling launch boxes.
Yeah, and you talked about the potatoes. If you actually go to the Rocket Greens Instagram, I believe it's CNSC, Churchill Northern Studies Centre Rocket Greens, you'll see actually a photo of the bonus potatoes they included in one of the subscriptions. And I'll include the Instagram on our ending slide. But you did talk about how sometimes you have too much produce, and that's when you're able to kind of do donations or kind of stuff everyone's boxes. Has there ever been a point where you haven't had enough to fill all of the subscriptions? And how did you overcome that challenge?
Yeah, well, I mean, over the years, we've had to cancel a couple of harvests just based on plant quality. We've had like any gardener, even though it's all contained and you're kind of in control of all the variables, we've still had troubles. So yeah, we have had to cancel harvest before, and in general, the response from our subscribers was fine. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm still working on some stuff from last week, which is totally fair because I'm also a subscriber, so I understand that feeling. And because they understand what it is, a community supported thing, and it can't be perfect all the time, that, you know, I think people in Churchill are used to adversity in general anyway. So yeah, I've never had anyone get bummed out. We don't charge for harvests that we cancel. It hasn't been many, so I think people are, I wouldn't say like they just like come to expect our consistency, but for us to be like, sorry, we missed one. Like, I mean, everybody misses a day here and there. So yeah, pretty understanding. Great. I mean, a great little town with a very supportive group. So yeah, we're lucky. Yeah.
And I have a question.
Given out some tiny boxes too, like over the years, every once in a while, like especially in the dead of winter, like our unit does very well, but it does struggle sometimes in the very extremes. Like it's happy in a set temperature range and then a little less happy when it's a lot colder. And sometimes we have our crops in general are just maybe 30% smaller than they should be, or sometimes even more. So sometimes our harvests are small, but it's still nice to be able to give something rather than nothing. And it's been very, very rare that we've not given out. So
yeah, and I think a big part of that is, you know, getting ahead of that. If you know, your crops are struggling, communicate that with your customers. And it's not just your customers, it's your community. So like, these people, you work and live around these people, you go to the same grocery store. I think especially when you're starting out and you have that learning curve of learning how to grow things in the grocer farm, I think it's okay to be like, hey, I'm having some trouble this week. We're going to have to cancel this. I'm so sorry, and mitigate it like that. And I think, it's better to kind of start smaller and build up to however many subscribers you want, and kind of have that core group that's like family, friends, where you're testing it out, you're getting comfortable growing. So like you said, just being honest with people. I think people really appreciate that.
I think new grocer customers will be at a little bit of advantage than I was, because they get a chance to learn from my mistakes, and grocers had a chance to learn a lot about how to train new growers and stuff, and all the things that I tripped on along the way through 2018 and into 2019. All those things are eliminated now. So I think that people are just people are already getting a better start than I did. And that's not I'm not throwing any shade at all. At Growcer, it was just a lot to learn for everybody at the beginning. And yeah, we've come a long way since then. So yeah, I think people are set up better, and the newer units are, a lot of the issues are gone now from them. So yeah, I think people are starting from a really good spot.
Yeah. So with that said, for those of you that don't know, Carley was Growcer's first ever customer. So you got the first farm, it was the first install. So the fact that you're still here 4 years down the line is a true testament to, how hard your team works, all the kind of troubleshooting that you and Growcer had along the way. And I know that the newer farms, I've seen them, they're very cool looking. But at the end of the day, those core principles of your work ethic, how you don't sweat the small stuff, these are the things that make a grower successful. So I don't think that technology is the only factor in your success. You're still here in 4 years, and that is a huge testament to all the work that you've done and your team has done. So actually that leads good into my next question, which is, what support did you have from Growcer along the way, and what was useful, especially when it comes to mapping out your launch box or anything on the plant side? What type of support did you have?
So the Growcer was always there to answer questions, and it's changed somewhat. Like I started from literally texting the owner of Growcer on a almost weekly basis, more than my own family. So Corey and I got pretty close there over the first year. But moving ahead, like as Growcer has grown as a company, you know, we've got someone assigned to us now, which is nice, and people in the logistics department that touch base with me. So like what I really love the most is just like, yeah, someone to answer my questions quick. The organization of all the supplies is super handy. Like I'm not in a place with the rest of my job duties to source the things that I need. So it's nice to be able to just buy that package each year and have everything shipped to us in one shipment. And it's all right there in my storage room and I know what I've got. So I like that. We went through the, I'm not sure what the current name is now, so I'm sorry if I get it wrong, but the crop optimization program with the horticulturalists. So we started weighing our produce and working through all of our cleanliness techniques and water health and stuff with the horticulturalists, which I found really interesting. And because I don't, so that's been, that was really nice. I think we did like, I don't know, almost 16 weeks or maybe a little bit more with them. And yeah, and then just opportunities to share and stuff like this. Like yeah, it's nice to be part of a broader community than just a tiny town that I live in. So yeah, to be invited to share has been super awesome as well. I find that supportive just because it is another way to, yeah, to gauge the sort of like the success of our project.
Yeah, and we are running up on 5 minutes, so I'm just going to ask a couple more questions. But to Carley's point, when you partner with Growcer and you get the farm, you also partner with the horticulture success team, and they kind of walk you through, okay, what should your plants look like? What is an example of a planting schedule? We use like a software that kind of automates most of that. So it's not like you're alone in your first year of growing. It's definitely very hands-on. You're getting trained in different kind of ways. Granted, a lot of it throughout the year is virtual, but for that first install week, it's very hands-on. You're in the farm. They're making sure that you know what everything looks like. So I think for a lot of people who are like anxious about like, oh no, can I master the technology? Carley just said she doesn't come from a horticulture background either, and here she is 4 years in with a successful subscription box. So it's possible. It's all about, do you have the grit, the determination, though you want to do it for your community. I think that plays a larger role than, knowing your plant cycles or your pests. So one question we do have here is, do you have to be licensed to operate your launch box or to sell from your farm?
That's a good question. We've been operating under sort of like a farmer's market type rule where if you pick the whole plant and sell it, then you don't need to have a licensed kitchen. Or we do have a licensed kitchen. We just don't always have a cook on staff. So yeah, as long as you're not altering the plants too much, I imagine that we probably walk a fine line with trimming the herbs, but it seems like I think for the most part we're following the rules.
Yeah, and so one question I also have,
how that is for other provinces. So yeah, that would be something you definitely would want to look into. Or if you're looking at doing more value added products, like if you want to do small salads or something, and you are going to alter the plants or chop things up a bit more than you probably would, and you would need to look into that as well. So.
Yeah, and you made a really good point. It's going to be province specific. I think there are, federal rules around it, but based on your location, there could be extra rules. So it's something that our Growcer team looks into that for you. So for those who had that question, that's something that you will look into before you, start your own subscription box to make sure that you're starting on the right foot. So I do have one final question. So what advice would you give to others on the call or others, watching this later about starting their own project for their community?
When you gave me the questions, I just wrote down the word relax because it's a little bit overwhelming at first. Definitely, like I was overwhelmed. I was stressed out, especially through that first winter. I couldn't believe that my plants could just grow by themselves without me being there. I was making my boyfriend drive me out here on the weekends just to check. But everything for the most part seems to work out. And if something does go wrong, it's just lettuce. And that's like what I always say to myself at the end. Like, if we have to cancel harvest, we have to cancel harvest. If something dies, it dies. You know, clean it up and move on. So yeah, stay relaxed, get to know your community. And yeah, I think everything else just kind of will come naturally.
Yeah, and I think, you know, relaxing is a huge part of it, but also, you know, trusting, you know, the people around you, like lean on Growcer if you have questions, you know, lean on your community, ask them like for their feedback. And especially, like you said in the start, if you do have some plant mishaps, like just communicate that with your customers. I think when you are part of a CSA or any type of community project, they're not only investing in that, you know, weekly subscription of produce, they're also investing in you and the success of your project. They don't want to see you fail. They want to see you succeed. So really tell people why you're doing it. Carley has a very strong mission with the Churchill Northern Studies Centre, and all the social medias and all the websites are on there as well. And they even have a Rocket Greens hoodie. If you look into their merch store, that's just like a little plug because it's very cool looking, but it's so important to know your why and why you're doing it. So that can get you through the harder harvest days or when anything trips up. So that is really great advice. Thank you so much to the audience, to Carley for joining us. We are running up on time. So if you do have a question, you can feel free to join. The next sessions, we're going to focus more on, you know, the financials, the logistics. We're going to hear from Darren, who is a business consultant, about what it looks like to know your market, to plan it out, to price your produce, to figure out what kind of strategy works best for you. And like I said, on the side, you can keep up where Rocket Greens and the Churchill Northern Studies Centre is on their social media pages. And for everyone who is registered for the food box workshop, you are automatically registered for the next sessions. So the sessions on the financial breakdown, the logistics, the business planning, we're going to dive into more of those kind of hard logistics. So this will happen every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. And by the end of February, we hope that you'll feel more confident, you know, starting your own project, starting your own weekly subscription box. We'll also be giving out a ton of other goodies like a checklist, a survey template, opportunities to submit your numbers so our team can take a look at it, let you know if you're on the right track. And if there's anything specific that you want to see in the next sessions, a survey will pop up after this webinar. So please feel free to give us your feedback in the survey that's going to pop up after this kind of session ends. So I just want to say thank you to Carley again, the whole team, and Fiona in the comments. That was great. And also the Growcer staff also in the comments helping to answer questions. Thank you everyone for your attention and your enthusiasm. And we hope to see you at the next session. If you want to know more about Growcer, there is our kind of website and the links in there as well. So if you want your question answered before the next webinar, feel free to just go to our contact page, send us a message, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So thank you, everyone. Carley, do you want to have the last word before we wrap this up?
Oh, just thanks for having me. Thanks for setting it all up. And yeah, if people want to reach out, they can do it through the social media or find me through the Churchill Northern Studies Centre website.
Okay, sounds awesome. We will include these links in our follow-up as well. So thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your week. And we hope to see you at the next session next week, Tuesday, same time.